What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we are here with Josh of Sentinels. Great to be able to talk with you today, man. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I was just listening to the first five singles you released off the debut album, Collapse by Design. First and foremost, this is the debut album. You know, you want to hit the ground running and you really want to start things off on a high note. I definitely think you did that. Other people are going to have to wait till the 22nd. But was there kind of like a preconceived idea? What was the idea with the making of Collapse by Design in order to, like, start the Sentinels catalog off on a high note?
So a little bit of a backstory here. So I joined the band right in the middle of COVID, and when the album had already been written. Dave Rucky, the drummer, had written all the lyrics and patterns, and it really became his passion project because the vocalist at the time had quit right as they were getting the deal, from Sharp Tone and whatnot. So I didn't have a whole lot to do with the whole writing or the vision, but they picked me to come in and actualize that vision. But as far as I can tell, in talking with Dave and reading the lyrics and performing them, this is a very personal album for him. It deals a lot with relationships and growth through the ending of those relationships and just finding a light at the end of the tunnel. That's a major theme through the course of the album. Is start to finish, we're going from thoughts of suicide to the end of the album being about finding new hope, essentially.
Yeah, I've always said that this album sort of had my analysis of it was that there's a constant fighting spirit present throughout it, where it addresses every aspect of internal and external darkness, but there is sort of like, in essence, like a don't give up sort of attitude that's demonstrated through it.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think he's a genius. He really is. Dude's a phenomenal drummer, great writer all around. So I think he did a great job actualizing that vision that he had.
Being that you released five singles off this album so far, Tyrant, Albatross, Inertia, and so many other singles. I mean, could these five singles serve as a good representation of what the entirety of Collapse by Design is going to sound like, or is there a lot more tricks and twists to be discovered?
So that's a great question. And the answer is yes. The first five singles are highly representative of what's going to be found on the rest of the album, with the exception of the last song, Atlas. The last song, Atlas, is sonically different than the rest of the album. And I think that was done on purpose to highlight that sort of finding new life, new light in theme with the rest of the album. It's a beautiful song, in my opinion.
Don't lie, it's a butt rock ballad, isn't it?
Some might say, but it's great.
That would be incredible trolling if you made that happen.
No, not this time. It's in my opinion, it's closer to like an invent animate sort of sound. It's the only track that deviates, I think, from the Sentinels sort of trademark.
Definitely. Being that you joined the band on the making of this album through the course of it, when you joined the band, were you kind of looking at like earlier material and watching them perform, or being like, okay, this is how I have to perform, or were you kind of allowed to bring a little bit of your own mix into Sentinels as well?
Both. So when I first was introduced to the band, I did my research for sure. I was seeing, what their fan base is like, what their catalog was like. I mean, I had already was aware of this band before I was introduced to them. Maybe a year prior to that, I had been introduced to Unsound Recollections and loved a few songs off of that EP, and we were in regular rotation. So when I got the offer, or when it was starting to be whispered in my ear that was a possibility, I was very excited. But as for bringing my own personality into the mix, they've been incredibly open to that. I've been able to be myself on stage and interact with the crowds how I please, and everything's meshing, man. I mean, I haven't been slapped on the wrist at all, and I mean, I think everything is just gelling exactly how it's supposed to.
Definitely. And I know you didn't write the lyrics in a way, but like, is there a way that maybe like the lyrics resonate with you to the point where it influenced how you exert it and how you sing it and how you know express it?
Oh, most definitely. It's strange because it really feels in some way like I have developed such a personal connection with these words that I almost feel like I wrote them. You know, I have found places in my life where these songs resonate with particular eras or memories for me, and so when I'm singing them, I might not be singing from the same memory, you know, the same situation that Dave is, but I have found a way to incorporate that into my own experience. You know, like lyrics are can be it's art. You interpret it through your own lens, and through my lens, I can find many places where I've felt those exact feelings that Dave is describing.
Do you almost feel like that this album does have a message that the entire band is trying to convey to the audience, or do you feel that maybe Claps by Design could be fairly open to interpretation?
Ooh, um, I think Dave intentionally left a lot of. I think he left it fairly ambiguous, with the exception of the emotional aspects of it. You know, those are pretty poignant, but yeah, I think he left it fairly open for interpretation. You know, you take those feelings that he's expressing and then you apply them to whatever life experience you had where you felt that way. And I think that that's what's so brilliant about his writing, and I think just good writing in general.
Yeah.
So, no, you know, more kudos to him for that.
Yeah, and you also got the upcoming tour with Lorna Shore, which I think is a great tour for you to be on, being that you guys are both New Jersey bands. And like, you know, I feel like, not to say like, you know, make it sound like a trend is happening and you guys are following it, but it almost seems like in the wake of bands like Lorna Shore or Shadow of Intent or Cabal, the rise of that band, it almost seems like this is the time for Sentinels to put out a new album and hit the ground running, right?
Yes, most definitely. So we actually just finished that run with Lorna, and we're about to hit the road with Boo, which is mind blowing to say the least. Because you know, I grew up, you know, a childhood hero listening to Born of Osiris. Just crazy, man. I can't wait to listen to Bow Down every night.
Yeah,
Assuming they play it.
Could you believe it's been 10 years since they put out the Discovery?
I cannot. Please don't remind me how old I feel.
Dude, like that is like, I mean, you know how like a lot of old school death metal fans are like, you know, Cannibal Corpse, it was my classic death metal album, or you know, Morbid Angel. That album, like Born of Osiris, I think Whitechapel's This Is Exile, like we're gonna be like talking about that the way the old school death metal fans talk about that.
It's still surviving, you know.
Yeah, and do you feel that maybe because like I thought that like Sentinel's music is, for lack of better words, fairly experimental enough to the point where you know, I can't really pigeonhole it as deathcore or tech death or slam or something like that. So like, do you think that like I could see you do a tour with like a Killswitch Engage, no problem. I could see you maybe do a tour with like a Ginger. I could see you do a tour with, you know, maybe like a technical death metal band like Obscura or something like that. Do you feel that maybe Sentinel's music can have a variety of different audiences?
Oh, for sure. I think that there's something for everyone in there. You know, Chris is so eclectic with his writing. You know, he's just drawn from so many different places that, you know, there is most certainly a heavy thought influence in his writing. But, you know, despite that, I think most of what he writes is fairly untouched. You know, there aren't too many places that you can point to and be like, oh, that sounds like Sentinels. You know, like it's a pretty unique sound in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think because of that, there's space for a broad range of audiences within our music. You know, so just like look at the singles so far. Like To Wither has a pretty you know, simple structure to follow. You know, it's just choruses and it's the most mellow and straightforward song. But then you look at Tyrant or Albatross and they're like rhythmically insane. They're all over the place. And then inertia itself is just one big cluster of insane rhythms that are just constantly coming at you the entire song. It's just a barrage of insanity.
Yeah.
But then later, when the album gets released, people will listen to songs like Solitude or Atlas and find something in that they can't find in any of the other songs, or Obsolete. So I think that there's something for everybody.
Yeah, most certainly. And I gotta ask this too, because you're the front man of the band, and I feel like your style of music, like I could just picture seeing this band live, and there's a lot of stage presence, there's a lot of crowd interaction that's involved. As a front man, do you almost feel like you need to practice stage presence or crowd interaction as much as you need to practice the lyrics and the technique and all that?
Most certainly. I spend maybe 30% of my practice time, just, looking at choreography, imagining how I'm going to be moving, where I'm going to be speaking to the crowd in between lines, or where I'm going to be breathing. All of that is incredibly important. And every show is, in my mind, there's an element of spontaneity, right? There needs to be just that room to express yourself in the moment, but then you need to have that. You can only really have that when you have a foundation that's pretty solid about okay, this is what I'm going to do here. This is what I'm going to do here. And over time that evolves in the moment. And that's, I think, where the true art starts to flourish, where somebody sees, this is somebody who is comfortable with what they're doing. And that spontaneity, when it does arrive, is what I think makes that show that much more engaging.
Yeah, definitely. And do you when you practice, you almost have stuffed animals or dummies set up, and you have to practice interacting with them? I know it's such a stupid question, but I've interviewed a couple artists where they say that they do that.
I have not, but I will definitely try that, because what I do right now is I'll pick a wall and I'll say, okay, this is the audience and this is my stage, and I will just go through the set, and I'll record myself, and I'll be like, okay, so I like this move that I do at this time, and I'll be like, okay, so I'll practice that until it becomes muscle memory, so that every time when that part comes up, I just automatically get into position and follow through with that stage presence.
Is there maybe a similar energy that you put into the stage as maybe you when you're recording or something like that? Is there at all maybe a similar energy that's involved, or anything that sort of ties the two together?
I think the thing that ties them together is the how do I describe it? The mental image. So before I was performing live, I think what helped me make the sound, on any cover or, whatever I was recording, was I would close my eyes and I would be there, in front of a crowd, and that's, I think, how my body, I would override whatever anxiety I was experiencing in that moment to be present and be able to project my voice the way that I want to, make it sound the way that I want to. So if anything were to tie them together, is just that mental space of putting yourself in front of that crowd, whether you're actually in front of them or not. Okay. It's the same for me.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that a good day in the studio is just as good as a good show. It's equally fulfilling, right?
Oh, it can be, but yeah, they're pretty different in that respect, because there's something incredibly satisfying about just nailing a take, where you're just like, oh man, that is the take, cannot get better than that. But you don't really have that on stage, because in the moment you're not really thinking, or I'm not thinking about, nailing every single line. There are so many other gears and levers and dials that I need to be paying attention to, that most of what's happening with my voice is below the level of consciousness. I'm not really, that's subconscious at that point, where it's just it's happening automatically. What I'm thinking about in the moment is where I'm breathing, where I'm standing, who I'm looking at, and what's about to happen,
Fair enough. And the next question I wanted to ask you is, again, being the sort of new guy in the band, though, and I'm probably asking this question way too far in advance, but this new album's coming out. Again, it's awesome. Is the band already cultivating ideas for what the next Sentinels album will sound like in a way, and bring and because it's fair to say like a lot of the songs were already written, so like I'd imagine that for the next Sentinels album, where all of you guys are going to be songwriting together, we're going to be experiencing an even bigger boom, right?
I hope so. Yeah, I don't know how Chris will feel about me saying this, but we'll see. So yeah, we've already got a handful of pre-pros worked out, not with vocals, but instrumentally. And at some point we'll sit down and start fleshing those out and see where they take us. So yeah, I mean, we're already looking ahead to the future because pretty much right as soon as I joined the band and the first record was already done, and I saw just how amazing it was. I was so on fire to be a part of something like that and have my presence involved in it. So I'm very excited to be a part of the next LP, so much so that we're already starting to work on it.
Hell yeah. Now, the next question I wanted to ask you, I've never asked this before, and it is kind of cliche, so forgive me in that, like, what are your inspirations? But, like, I've been doing a lot of, like, research lately, and I always like talking to bands like Sentinels or Shadow of Intent or, like, bands of my generation, because most of them are closer to my age. When I interview, like, a musician who's, like, 20 years older, they say that they take their metal inspirations from Iron Maiden or Judas Priest or Metallica or something like that. But talking with you, you cite Born of Osiris as a huge inspiration. I grew up with bands like Killswitch Engage and All That Remains and stuff like that. So I am curious to what is sort of your inspiration that made you gravitate towards this style of music, because most of the bands I've interviewed like in this sort of style, they didn't cite Master of Puppets or Countdown to Extinction as like the album that sort of made them go into the world of metal.
So let's see. It was a gradual transition. So my very first introduction into heavier styles of music was System of a Down, and then and I remember distinctly that I hated it, but maybe a year later something clicked and I got it. And I was like, yo, like this is amazing, and that kind of started the train. And then I started listening to bands like Volumes, Born of Osiris, just anything that was outside the norm. And then I discovered Hate by Thy Art Is Murder, and that album changed my life. I wanted so badly to sound like CJ. And then North Flame was a massive influence, and then the nail in the coffin that solidified me saying like, okay, this is what I'm doing with my life was I was doing YouTube covers, and I found this guy JT from YouTube, and he was just a powerhouse. He was just an absolute powerhouse of a vocalist, and I was just in awe. I was like, this is the pinnacle. This is what I'm going for. And he became the target. And after that, he went on to join Texas in July, and then after that, he joined Era. So, that was the moment that I was like, yes, this is what I'm going to be doing. So it wasn't even particularly really a band and that made me go like, yo, like this is it. It was certain vocalists, it was certain people, like their sounds, like Adrian from North Lane, CJ from Thy Art, JT from Era, who else? So the moment, the actual moment that I said like, all right, I'm going to be a vocalist. I was at a show. My very first show, I was 15, and I saw My Children, My Bride, and a vocalist went on the stage. And from the moment that he started commanding the crowd, something just came over me, and I was like, this is it, dude. This is what I'm going to do. And ever since that moment, I just started going after it.
Yeah. It's like a breath.
I hope that answers your question.
It did, and it's such a breath of fresh air to talk like inspirations with somebody who's like, again, from a similar generation as I am, because hanging out with a bunch of old school hardcore guys or a bunch of old school punk, like, all old school. And just to think that, like, these bands that all you just mentioned are going to be looked at as old school. I mean, there's some people who talk about the first August Burns Red album like it's ancient now. Like, I'm like, that band blew up when I was in high school. Like, so.
Right.
So it's cool to see, and I think a lot of these bands you mentioned are going to have like a legacy, because there are some bands that were kind of like, I guess, part of a trend in a way. Like you mentioned Texas in July, but JT's now an era and they've been killing it. We all remember Attack. Well, Caleb is now in Beartooth, so it almost
right.
seems like a lot of those bands paved the way for what would later become. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the members of Parkway Drive was an I Killed the Prom Queen as well. So
I'm not sure, but I actually vaguely think that that's correct, actually. So yeah.
So, people like to make fun of the whole metalcore thing, but it seems like we've all been going to good places.
Yeah, man. And I can't wait to see the future.
Yep, we're all the scene kings. But before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for such an awesome chat. Is there just anything else that you would like to promote for the release of Collapse by Design? You mentioned you have the upcoming tour with Born of Osiris, but I'd imagine we'll be seeing you all on the road quite a bit, right?
I hope so. So the only thing that I want to plug is just pre-order that album. It drops October 22nd, and then we hit the road with Born of Osiris the 29th for a whole month. So pre-order that album and give it a spin. Come check us out on the road.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Sentinels. Be sure to check out Collapse by Design, coming out October 22nd. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.